fresh from the Sundance Screenwriters Labs. You're here with a project here for the weekend, one of a dozen of 4,000 submissions that were accepted. It's worth noting that you are the recipient of the Sundance Institute Comedy Fellowship. What exactly does that entail? How does that help?
The Sundance Comedy Fellowship comes with a small grant, so that helps us in terms of like money to scout locations, money to get a line budget going. It's just sort of starting funds. The Comedy Fellowship was just awarded because the script is funny, so they don't have any extra requirements beyond that.
Okay.
It's really just there to help get the project moving and give some initial funds to play around. I think one aspect of being at the labs is talking about how, like, the more you can deepen the character's history, sometimes, and make it raw and find those, like, messy, dirty truths, like, it can actually lead to good humor. A lot of my script it's about sort of pleasure and highlighting joy and fun. The characters themselves have like a very quick wit, and so actually I think a lot of my advisors thought that there was a bit more room to explore the other side of things, to like dive into the tensions, the drama. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's going to be my first comedy.
Yes, because looking at your filmography, you cut your teeth on about a half dozen shorts. Mm-hmm. You moved into television directing, but the directing was in the supernatural and the horror realm. So this is really a 180. How did those films over the last decade help contribute to penning this project?
I think growing up, I watched a certain type of, like, a canon of like suffering male artist cinema, and really associated that with like great art, that if you can look at like the truly uncomfortable aspects of life without flinching, like that makes you the top artist, and I am very much interested in exploring the contradictions and like hypocrisies and sorrows of life. Mm-hmm. That was the well I was pulling from when I started making movies. I think after like many years living, my shorts were quite intense, heated. I called them like panic attacks. Okay. And then I started a whole writing career for TV. Did 2 seasons of a Facebook Watch show called The Birch, and then a season of a Peacock show called Girl in the Woods. And I think after living in that horror headspace for a long time, I wanted to move into exploring pleasure, joy, connections, and also was curious about finding cinema that, one, talks about the stuff I think about on a daily basis. I'm surrounded by funny people who think more about the contradictions of like balancing love with a career, like how to navigate the world in your 30s, especially like the current landscape that we have. Mm-hmm. And housing crisis, rough economy, inflation, like how do you marry? I think more than ever you have to be like clear in setting like a long-term path for yourself, and it's a question that women have been asking for a long time, like, can you have it all? Can you have like a great career, like a great love, all of that? And so moving more into that space. And I have to say, I think working in horror, like horror structure tends to function like joke structures. There's a lot of like rule of threes, like planting tensions, subverting the tensions, a jump scare is sort of like a punchline. And so it felt like it exercised similar things.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I like that parallel.
Yeah.
So you were, to be in amongst the lab folks, there has to be something very special about what's on paper. What do you believe was the main hook, line, and sinker that the advisor said, oh, we really responded well to this aspect of what you put on paper?
I think all of the advisors thought that the characters were really like specific and rich and funny and charming. One of the advisors said that it was like charm on paper, which is a huge compliment.
Wow.
And so I think for everyone it was about like how do we get under that surface. The main character in particular is like always firing, and the contradiction at the heart of her is that she is incapable of asking for help. She's a housekeeping manager at a hotel. She's launching her own lingerie brand. She takes care of like 2 other trans girls who live with her and her mom, and is used to being caretaker to everyone in her life, and likes it, like loves that it gives her agency, loves that it allows her to have control in her life. I think she has a hard time trusting other people, and yet she has all these like romantic and erotic fantasies about relinquishing agency and control. Like she has that image of like the prince that comes and carries her into the sunset. But likely she would micromanage that prince. Like it's impossible for her to relinquish control. And so I think because she's firing all the time, there were questions of like, can we have a moment where she finally has to ask for help? You know, how do we get underneath that mask? And
so there's givers and takers, and she's much more of a giver and so uncomfortable being a taker.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to seeing how you dress and how you totally appropriate the character of Cherry. I could very much see this being a breakout role for whoever this person's going to be. In terms of influence, it could be cinema, but also ideas outside of cinema. Like, what would your pitch deck look like? What would be some strong elements that stick out of that, I imagine?
Influences are like, first and foremost, Fellini. The structure of the film is very similar to Nights of Cabiria. I'm a huge fan of the way Fellini sees the world and is able to marry this sort of feeling that like life is a carnival with, like, you know, within one frame you can have someone having the best day of their life and reveling in spectacle, and then someone in the corner of the frame has just like lost the person that they love most. And it really, that's how I see the world. I see the world as a kind of spectacle of humanity, and I think within that, you know, people read the script and it's Palm Springs, it's like pastels, it's resorts, it's fantasy, it's like these sexy girls like designing lingerie, and they think that the world itself will be heightened. I think that what I'm interested in doing is bringing a sense of mise-en-scène naturalism. The world itself is one of luxury, but letting the camera dance, you know, like letting the camera move us through spaces in delicious ways. I really love, you know, films with a sort of maximalist aesthetic in that sense. I think looking at films by like Scorsese or Paul Thomas Anderson who marry sort of naturalism within the mise-en-scène with a more heightened impressionistic camera. Very much interested in doing that type of work.
That's so cool. I'm so happy to hear that.
And the film itself dances between a sort of, you know, buddy hangout film a la Dazed and Confused, you know, the camera just drifting with like these 3 girls as they hang out and gossip, with moments of heightened fantasy. And then you can imagine like the sex scenes in like Basic Instinct, like deeply choreographed, deeply sexy, very specific, like, you know, treating it like proper choreography. And the girls themselves are fashion heads. And so I think that allows us to dress them in bold, make bold choices. Like, each have their own personal identity that they curate.
I know that a filmmaker like Xavier Dolan is very much on point with how his characters are physically manifesting their interior lives and their exterior lives. So
I love Xavier Dolan's films. I think that would be another one of my references.
So the film, I imagine there's already some players. Maybe you can't elaborate on that, but I imagine you have some players on board already, not in front of the camera, but like producers and stuff like that. Who are some key people that are involved in this project?
At this point, we don't have any formal attachments with the project, which is exciting. We've started the packaging process by reaching out to a certain big-name actor who has a production company, so they would be the first attachment. I co-wrote it, or I wrote it by myself, but I developed the story with my collaborator, Charlie Pollinger. We've written a few different scripts together. His involvement was very much just like me throwing ideas at the wall and him saying that, not that, you know, inspiring me to go deeper and also sort of prioritize, like, the specificity of, like, trans girls hanging out. Over time, the project evolved from one particular love story into sort of this, like, ensemble piece more akin to Dazed and Confused or Nashville, but with one central character who's chasing a particular seduction of a resort guest.
I like the idea of almond overlap and stuff like that. I'll end with this question. Yes. So you arrive from the labs, they inflate the ego, they break the ego into two, and you think about, oh my God, I wrote the biggest piece of shit sometimes. That's not the case for everybody, but how you know, 4 or 5 days after having been at the labs, how are you thinking about the project right now? Are you looking forward to just taking a vacay right now at Sundance and then coming back to it with a different guise? Like, how do you feel right now about what it is on paper?
I feel like the labs put me in a really kind of emotionally truthful space with the characters. And I think when you get to that place where it's like you can just see them each in all of their complexity, it gives you this like runway to just get like messy and dirty and like don't hold back with them. And so I don't see there being any like huge structural headaches. I think it's just now like the thing that's really like a treat as a writer. I can just go into each scene and like enrich it and blow it up and
and give those characters more knickknacks and dimensions and breathe more life into them. Jane Casey, it's an absolute pleasure having spoken to you about this project. I'm really ecstatic for what we might see on screen. So just thank you for your time and thank you for sharing this project with us.
Thanks so much. I can't wait to share the finished thing with everyone. I'm so excited.
Yay. Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.